Good morning and welcome to PTC'22, the Women Power Breakfast on Diversity and Inclusion. My name is Sophie and Terrisse, and I am the executive chairman of 26'5, a consulting firm with a network of agencies around the world. But I want to introduce my peer, Lynn Smullen, who actually not only has a lot to tell us about her new role as VP, Global VP and Industry Leader for Oracle, but also I think wanted to do a few thank yous. So, Lynn.
Good morning. It is so great to see you. Welcome. It is so great to see every one of you, both here in person and online. Lynn Smullen, as Sophie says, and I'm with Oracle. I am the segment industry lead for comms, and also I'm the global VP in charge of a number of our strategic clients. It is my great honor to be with this amazing woman on stage here. For those who don't know Sophie, Sophie is the chairperson for her company 26'5 and is an industry leader and recognized as a thought leader in marketing. So it's my great honor to be here with you. And we are really excited. Look, I am first off so thankful for every one of you to make time to have this really important conversation. Before we get started though, we have some thank yous. The first is I want to take a moment to thank our dear friends at Verizon, and that's Eric Sivas, Sonal Patel, Tariq Khan, and a number of folks that are here for taking the time to sponsor this really important conversation about how we bring diversity, inclusion, and elevate the position of female leadership throughout our industry and throughout everything we do. Really thrilled to do that. So thank you, Verizon, for sponsoring that. The second thank you is for this lovely, amazing peer, colleague, leader, and ally, an amazing ally for joining me on the stage for something so important and meaningful to us. But then the third, probably the most important thank you is to all of you for taking the time out of your schedule to be part of the conversation and to be part of the change that we're going to drive through PTC and through our companies going forward.
So actually, we do have a little bit of a story. I actually was on this panel probably about 10 years ago, and I remember being absolutely petrified. I had good reason to be. Because it was one of the very first panels to start talking about diversity and inclusion. What is actually absolutely phenomenal is the changes that have taken place in the past 10 years. What is not absolutely phenomenal is the fact that we still are meeting, we're still discussing some of the same exact issues that have not entirely evolved. There's been some progress, not everywhere, but I think with COVID, there's also been some setback in a lot of people's agenda around diversity and inclusion. So it is really important to actually use this session. We actually think about having more of a discussion with everybody in the room, talking about inclusion. I want to really thank the one man in this room who, who showed up and is here to talk about inclusion. And my very first point is being on those panels for the past many years. There's a big difference between diversity and about inclusion. And a lot of the, maybe one of my goals is to actually call this the Power Inclusion Breakfast, because it's not just about women, it's about everything. And inclusion is about gender, but it's also about where you come from, color of your skin, ageism. It is about your opinion, you actually, your cultural baggage when you walk into a room and how people are perceiving you. But what it is also now is a very clear agenda with guidelines like the ESG guidelines and, the United Nations coming up with projects like the Global Impact, which are all about really fostering, bolstering how you achieve real inclusion. And it's really interesting to see that what used to be a discussion is now a project that every company has to actually answer for. So we now have different guidelines, we have different projects. Some companies, and I'm really glad to recognize one in the room, IBC, for example, has signed the treaty, in quote, the commitment to be part of global impact. But a lot of companies are doing a lot of really interesting projects. And since you are just joining Oracle and you have a lot to say about that, maybe you can talk about exactly how Oracle is looking at the topic and the actions they're taking.
I would love to share that with you and with the group. Before I do have to share one little story I have. So I have been in telecom since I was born, I think, probably, which is
Don't
only
say that.
22 years ago right now. So I've been in telecom for probably 25 years, and I know a number of you. I've grown up in the industry, and I remember coming to this event. It was named something slightly different, and it was at the Tapa Pool. And I walked in there, and if those of you who know Kathy Morrissey from AT&T, there's a number of leaders, and I remember seeing them and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so intimidated. These are incredible women. Wow. But the best thing that came out of that was I saw what I could be. I saw these incredibly strong women, an incredible group of little thought leaders. But what was the best thing about that was that began a journey, about 20 years of engaging, networking, collaborating, creating relationships for mentoring, coaching, and development that those leaders really helped elevate me over the next 20 years to where I am today. So I tell you that as my personal journey, and to those starting out, how much great potential there is through PTC in addition to what you do with your company.
Actually, Kathy Morrissey was the first lady that ever attended one of our client leadership summits. And I remember it was 12 men, 2 young marketing girls, and Kathy walking in the room. And she would take no hostage. She was super quiet. And literally, through the course of that round table, she would go like this. And she said, I have something to say. And I remember I was like, I'm going to use this. And I actually did use it for a long time because now I'm a little silent and I jump, but I have something to say is a Kathy Morrissey move that I think a lot of the ladies in the industries were very lucky to learn early in their career, and that's how their voice were heard. So I'm pretty sure Kathy is no longer interested in listening to this, but I think, she did so much for everybody.
So much for everybody, and just the ability to engage, right, with her and other amazing leaders. So at Oracle, I'll tell you, we had some really interesting things that we're doing. Diversity and inclusion, like how many people think we're in innovation, right? Are you in innovation? Is your industry, is your company in innovation? Is there anybody who doesn't think they're in innovation, right? Innovation is born through what? What's it born through?
Creativity.
Creativity, right? Creativity. And so, but where does creativity and thought come from?
Diversity.
I have a straight person right here. Like,
I'm just moving that like
diversity. And diversity comes from creating an environment where those who come from so many different backgrounds, passions, interests, every element of that element of diversity feels included. They feel like they can be part of a group, part of a purpose, a much bigger purpose, but recognized, encouraged, and rewarded for their contributions. And that is why Oracle for diversity and inclusion, it is such a critical part for what we do and why it's a competitive advantage, because without that, we can't be innovative. And if we're not innovative, we are not evolving for the future, growing for our shareholders and all of our stakeholder community. We have some really exciting things we've done. So in diversity and inclusion at Oracle, we have a group that spans the global footprint, over 150 senior leaders that are both female and male, that sponsor local level diversity and inclusion teams. And those teams do very local things as far as everything from recruitment, right? Identifying and collaborating with things like HSBU, with the United Negro College Fund, with target universities, with STEM organizations, everything to try and identify the greatest new talent to bring into the organization, and then creating mentoring programs to help coach and mentor this great potential talent throughout the Oracle organization and help them grow and evolve. So it starts at the beginning, but all the way through everyone's career throughout. I'm thrilled to be part of it. It's been in place for 20 plus years, I think now, and in different names and different forms, but it's been something we're committed to. And we were just recognized by Forbes this year as one of the best diversity employers in the world. So we are thrilled with that. In addition to the great work we do in DE&I, we also have a 60 plus employee resource groups and affinity groups that cover all areas of interest, all areas of background, all for, again, creating that environment where people feel connected. They feel connected to one another. They feel connected to the purpose of the organization, and they feel rewarded and recognized for what they contribute. So I can tell you, I am so proud to be part of the Oracle family and the Oracle team, and realize the strength and the power of diversity and inclusion in everything we do.
So a quick question. A while back, I was on a panel with Anne Morel from France Telecom, and we had a bit of a disagreement around quotas. So a lot of the large organizations have, and you are definitely one of the best. I read the article last night. I didn't want to check, but still, you know, it is how do the organization get organized for real inclusion, and what does it mean for them when it comes to innovation? So on the other side of the house, when I don't do telecom, but I do other tech, I deal with a lot of AI companies. And when you're thinking about inclusion and AI, and when you're thinking about how it imply and impact our industry, it's actually really frightening. AI is on the basis of algorithm, how you recognize people's patterns. Those algorithms are mostly built by men. 87% of the AI DevOps are actually men. So they build patterns that actually do not recognize accent. Ask my husband, he will never put me on a customer service call because nobody understands me. It will not recognize some of the criteria that actually foster inclusion. So for example, AI in one of the latest, recent studies showed that if you apply for credit and the platform is powered by AI, if you actually are a male, white, in the United States, you may actually get an average of $80,000 as access. If you are a female, Black, under 30, you would get $3,800 in access for the same exact criteria in credit score. The algorithm does not understand the difference. So not having women in our industry, when it comes to not only building the network, but building how we actually are powering those new technology, not having women in technology means the future of technology is being built without us in it. We are not being represented. It's not just women, it's culture, it's ESL, so English is my second language. Try to take that with an automated, kind of system. It does not recognize some of the nuances that actually really make a difference of how innovative you can be. The other thing is in AI, we have barely 4% of women that are on the DevOps side of AI. There is no representation whatsoever, and it's extremely, extremely low. So projects like yours are fabulous. We were involved in a project with Accenture in India, and all those projects can start really small. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you do really like concretely, because a lot of companies come to us and say, we have an ESG agenda, what should we do? We want to launch CSR, what can we do? And I think it's really, really hard because when you have a large company, your model, what works, should become a model for maybe smaller company or company that are transforming. So you were talking about recruitment, you were talking about mentoring programs. How exactly do you approach them? And how do you quantify the difference that they're making?
Thank you. Such a great point. And coming from the technology space, it becomes, for those of us in it, it's surprising if you have children, particularly daughters, when you look at how many people are in DevOps and how many represent diverse groups. I have two daughters. I have two daughters and a son, and one who is particularly interested in technology. And so I have this keen eye to watch for and create opportunities for her and everyone else. Because you see their potential, but you also see what they're faced with. And when they show up, and if they see no one that looks like them, no one that's like them, it is not an environment that they feel welcome or the ability to be included. So it is our responsibility, every one of us in this room, to create that environment. Oracle stepped outside of the bounds and said, we can't do this alone. We have to create partnerships with universities, partnerships with localities, partnerships with STEM elementary schools, partnerships with all elements, if you will, throughout the process so that we start creating awareness, specifically creating opportunities to bring young people in from all diverse backgrounds and introduce them to who is Oracle and what is the potential. Partnerships all the way through university to sponsor people through internships, get them exposure to all elements of what we do, but also industry partnerships. So partnerships with some of our partners that are here today in the telecom space and in the hardware space, because this isn't just about a single company. If we all do this individually as companies, and there's Dan Davis and he and I spoke about this morning or yesterday morning. If we all do this individually, we will make incremental progress. But what we need to do is create a much broader coalition across our industry as ICT, where we work together to elevate, to create the opportunities for others to feel welcome, to feel identified and understood very early in the process. So when we're creating AI platforms that have certain technologies in them, they reflect the rest of our community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. More and more companies, when it comes to AI, but not just AI, are actually creating groups that are advocate groups that actually can be part of all the testing, just to make sure that there is representation. Companies are actually now, with some of the new agenda like ESG, are in a position where it becomes formalized. It has to become, it's not just an agenda you choose, it's really an activity you will be, you will be faced with and judged on. And I think a lot of the discussion has shifted from, if you have a diverse company, you can attract better talent. Well, yes, you will. Actually, for 87%, I think, of people interviewed said a diverse company is more, appealing. But the game is changing because with ESG, it's not a choice. It's not an agenda. It's an obligation. So now it's a responsibility to put those programs together. And I think there is something that's also fabulous about diversity. So I don't even know what generation I am, but it's an old forgotten one. And, we've been talking about the millennials. I have a son and he's talking about the Gen Z. That's the next thing. He's like, Mom, there will be no discussion around diversity because, 48% now of our own population is all diverse. It no longer matters to us. And I'm like, okay, that's changing the discussion. So what does matter next? Because the technology, the network, the connectivity we're creating, the fabric we are a part of, well, it's for their generation where they're looking at diversity very, very differently. So actually, Lynn and I were talking about, usually we always talk, and we would love to welcome questions or actually welcome experiences. So we don't have a mic in a room. So I think you will do a much better job of repeating either the question or the statement, but we'd love to hear a little bit about either what your company is doing or also questions that you have around what type of actions are measurable that can be taken when it comes to inclusion at large. And again, it's diversity and inclusion, but my position is diversity does not matter if you have inclusion. Diversity is a quota, which we need those quotas, but we should go far beyond this. So what is in place when it comes to inclusion in your company and what changes have you seen? And now I'm very happy to say we have 4 men in the room.
Yes, thank you.
A round of applause for them. So anyone, any specific program or any specific experience you have had in the past? Sorry. one other thing we're seeing is also in the recruitment part, a lot of our clients have changed how they're recruiting. So names disappear. You don't have any indication of names on the resumes. And you're going to say, but hold on, that's, if I have a quota, I don't have a name, how do I? Well, I think because there's been so many issues around recruitment and trying to meet quota, what we're seeing is a lot of organizations start the very first waves of recruitment in a way where it's totally anonymous. Sometimes dates are being changed. Someone can absolutely be, judgmental or critical of the fact that I got a law degree in 1989. Like, that's, like my son says, it's another century, mom. So, removing dates, removing names, and at times removing, some of the belongings or even the location you're in for global company has helped being able to identify talent on the basis of talent and then bring those talents and be able to work with them on how they fit into the better, greater agenda. And AI is a part of that. So, every time someone puts something on LinkedIn, I said, it's not a person who's choosing you. It's some algorithm somewhere that does not see, your experience. It only sees keywords. It only sees, how you're presented. And I think that also matters on educating people on how to achieve better inclusion using technology as well.
And it speaks to conscious and unconscious bias, right? And how we have to be so much more mindful of that. One of the things that reminded me of the recruitment is what we've all seen now is, so we have to have, if we look at it as a pipeline and how we have to invest in a pipeline, it's investing from the beginning in individuals to bring and encourage them to come to our companies, to get educated in certain technologies. But then once they're there, you have to create this culture of inclusion. You can't just bring everyone in and then say, okay, yep, we're done, check the box, everyone's, because now look what's happened with, whether you call it the great resignation or the great restart or the great, right, whatever. For the last 3 to 4 years, the pandemic has accelerated it to the point where there is a 2-to-1 ratio of the number of women who left the workforce in the last 3 years. They left the workforce by choice. Not by choice that they wanted, but in many cases it was childcare because of the pandemic or because of financial reasons, healthcare reasons. The point there is we're starting to get better at the recruitment. We still can do a heck of a lot better. But now we have to figure out how we retain and grow. And what are the things we need to do to create a welcoming environment where people feel included, they feel recognized, they feel like they belong, and they want to stay. The number one reason why most of those folks left, and this is a MIT Sloan study that came out maybe 3 or 4 months ago. The number one reason why folks left so far during the Great Resignation was a toxic corporate culture. Guys, you can fix that. It's a toxic corporate culture. And underneath that, when you dig in, the number one reason was diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
So we see the issue, we see it, and we can solve it, but we have to rethink how we're showing up as teams, as people, as companies, as individuals. That we didn't touch on networking. One thing that we all know probably benefited from, and we need to help coach, is how to create stronger networks for our folks that are younger in their careers. What does that mean? What's the value of it? Because you and I know this, we all know this, is the value when you're getting supported and promoted is immeasurable. What people say about you outside the room and how they promote and put you in different positions has somewhat to do with the merits and accomplishments, but it has more to do with the relationships that you've built. So the criticality and the importance of when we all give back, which every one of us should be, in the form of mentoring and coaching, is helping people understand that, create networks with purpose, and continue to invest in each other over time.
And there's a lot of focus on the mentoring and coaching, angle of inclusion, because it's very, very difficult. You're talking about women leaving the workforce during, during COVID. The same study, I'm pretty sure we're reading the same thing, said that 89% of the workforce felt they were totally burned out. It's not a gender, stat, and 81% of those 89 said that they were not hopeful that things would get better unless their company could entirely rethink how they contribute, not even how they work, but how they contribute. And it was really interesting because, we're talking about inclusion. I'm always talking about, navigating people's life. So, a lot of, we had women in our group who got promoted just before COVID, and COVID hit. And obviously, it was challenging, babies at home, relocation, and everything. So the very first reaction was, well, you know what, this person needs to be demoted, this person needs to be repositioned and everything. I said, no, you leave this person whenever they are. And you just take in consideration the situation they're in. And COVID is an exceptional situation. It's not a peak program, it's not anything. Let them rebuild the job on their own around where they can contribute. And we had 2-3 cases of people who really came in, raise their hand and say, okay, I will work better on those hours, on those specific responsibility. I want to take on this. I know I can no longer take on that. And they kind of rebuild our organization by default. And we're very small. We're not like you. We're very small, so scale helps. Being able to help your team really rebuild where they think the contribution is the highest. And we've grown tremendously through COVID with so many changes, but they were not administrative HR changes, they were human changes. People became open about difficulties with taking care of parents, taking care of children, having a husband screaming on the phone 12 hours a day because they're on the call and you have to be on the call, but they're the only one on the call. And I'm like, I can't relate to that situation. The other thing, and we're not talking about global, but we have a group in India. And I think it's all about the communication. Inclusion is about asking your team all the time, what is not working? I'm quite embarrassed to say it took us 8 months to realize that working from home in India is not working from your living room or your couch in America. We had kids that really were working on the floor and didn't have desks and didn't have a room to go and it was so embarrassing that we did not understand that earlier. So we shipped desks and we shipped computers, and we actually reopened the office for anyone who wanted to come with very different guidelines. And I think that's what organization needs to do more and more. Inclusion is about continuing having a loop, discussing exactly what your talents want. And there are mechanisms for that. So I think that's definitely one of the efforts that we see today. How many of you are mentors in a room? Like technically mentor, half of you. Technically, technically you have committed to start nurturing someone or many people. Some of us are doing it with entire group. Some of us, based on the organization, are doing one-on-one or one to a group. So, anyone here, about half of the room, has a program in place or have in their life being part of a mentor program, correct?
Excellent.
And you're a mentee.
Excellent.
And how many of you think it's really, really hard to be a mentor? I think it's extremely difficult because it's requiring time. And guess what? Time is the one thing I don't think anyone has here. But also it's requiring taking a very different position with your organization, where you have to look at someone's experience, not from the agenda of your mentoring program, but from the feedback that you're getting from your mentee. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations, I think Oracle, I read the paper, I think Oracle definitely does it, which is supporting mentor program by making it actionable, not just, again, a list and the progress of the mentees, but also how do you take that feedback to change the company? That's time for juice. Change the company and and really alter the culture at large.
which so we have a voice, as many companies do, voice of the employee, right? And it's your voice, called Your Voice survey. And one of the things that I love the most coming out of that is, how many of us have filled out surveys, information about companies, and you put it into a virtual black box, and then you never feel like you get anything back. I check, I give feedback. I'm not sure things are really changing. Oracle's entirely different. So the feedback that came out of that survey by group, we have turned into executive sponsored action. So I'm sponsoring, for example, rewards and recognition. And how do we rethink? And the conversation isn't just about our organization. It's about a diverse group of folks that come from the entire company together to say, what's working, what should we change, and then how do we go about doing it? And that is across at least 15 different themes in the company that we're taking on. So it's all about using our voice as leaders, as members in our communities there, to express and then to take action, really, and to follow through on that action for driving change. I do think that the pandemic is accelerating that, right? I think people feel like they're zoomed out, they're exhausted, they have, childcare, adult care, work, home, and there's no longer a separation. So I do think what's also happening, as you said, this is the redefinition of roles, redefinition of what does that role look like for an organization? How do you shape it in a way that creates the best quality of life, but it balances all elements of that? And our industry historically had a very separate view of your home life and your work life, right? It was, this is who I am at home and this is who I am at work. What I love that the pandemic has done is forced every one of us into everybody's home, right? I saw your kids, you saw mine, you saw my dog, you saw, right? There wasn't that barrier, which for extroverts like me was actually a good thing, right? Because you feel connected. For introverts might have been a little bit, a little difficult and challenging, but what it did is it reconnected us at a human level that I think creates that vulnerability in that environment where we can have honest dialogues about diversity, equity, inclusion, and then how do we create that change?
So Oracle is about DEI, not just DNI. So I love that E. E stands for equity. And, it's pretty much a fact. Women are still making about 82% of what men make for the same exact, qualification and the same exact performance. I love the whole idea of, equality, parity when it comes to everything, recognition of, your achievement, but also flat out your paycheck. Very often, it's been very difficult for the large company to alter how their compensation structure is structured. You can't, you when you work in CPG and you work with a Unilever or even an Accenture, you've got the layers. You've got your, this is how it works. That's what you can expect. It's predictable. It's really interesting. The issue is, where do you start at the layer? If you start and men and women have exactly, and anyone else have exactly the same salary, you can only create equality and, equity moving forward. For those companies, it's like, how do you start there now with this new generation? How do you re-engage saying, okay, now for the same job at entry level, it will be the same exact package, regardless of, any kind of profile. So we have seen a lot of effort, very, very practical effort to change that. And I think that's also a huge step. Mm-hmm. It's a daunting step. You don't want to work with HR when you do that, but it is actually, it's taking effect, and I think it's making a huge difference as well. The last point, you were talking about how COVID changed everything. So we've been talking diversity, equity, inclusion. I just read I'd be right with you, a paper in 1 second, because I can keep a thought. So I read a paper that said the next big word will be individuality. And the next big word will be about recognizing people on an individual basis. And the next big buzz would be individuality and innovation. So I will leave that with everybody, because I think it is the next step from diversities and quota and inclusion, individuality and innovation. If they are actually, as this study in HBR demonstrated, related, every one of us matter regardless of where we belong. So that's going to be the next big, wave, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years. Heather, sorry. Mhm. Mhm. Men. Yes. Mhm. Mhm. So I'm gonna jump on what you're describing because this afternoon there is an initiative, and I hope anyone here can join, or you can invite your younger one. Actually, IBASIS with Isabel, who created this initiative for the Inclusion Hub, is going on a cruise, not too far, not too long. It's from 3 to 4, and literally will bring together mentors and mentees. And I'm running to the secretariat to invite all the young people, whether you're mentioning here, because you can't mentor someone until you find out really what they want, but also what they need. Sometimes mentee wants something, but that's not necessarily what they need. So being able to craft program where the mentee can say, hey, my problem is not a new computer. My problem is not to talk in a meeting. My problem is not ABCD. My problem is really help foster those programs. So again, if you are interested, please actually at this table, you can get some invitation, invite your colleague. And it's really about creating a place where the mentor and the mentee can talk about what this program needs to do. Yes.
Oh, Nat. Oh, that's funny.
We miss her. And I'm glad you're here. We're like, is this, I hope we didn't do anything wrong. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I hope you're joining. And we will see you. I think we can learn a lot. Your point about mentoring is personal. I think that's the most important thing. Organization have to understand, and they have to foster the fact that you cannot be a good mentor if it's not personal, and you cannot be a good mentee unless it becomes personal. I very often people say, okay, how did this whole thing happen with you with the small French girl in the US and everything? And I said, Florence, one person. I worked for her for 4 years. She was a professor in Paris. She was blind. And pretty much everything that I've learned and applied in business It's about relationship. It's about how you treat people. It's about your own limit. And she taught me that. Everything else I taught myself. And as Elon Musk says, you can teach yourself everything. So it's really more, how do you become a mentor on a personal level? How do you tell that person, don't get bang out of shape about that promotion. Your time will come. Don't get all nasty with this colleague because you look bad. It's really personal. And I think that's really what's difficult for organizations. How do you implement something that is so individualistic and so personal? So I think it's great to be a mentor. I'm not really a formal mentor. I kind of touch a lot of people, but I always also tell people your mentor chose you. You can knock on someone's door and say, you're going to be my mentor. And I always tell people on our team, what do you say when you knock on the door that will want to make any one of your colleagues mentor you? And I think all of us can help with that discussion. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mentee?
Mentee.
Mm-hmm. You've done that for me.
So, yeah, you do that for
I hate the
everyone,
camera.
like all of them.
I'm like, sometimes my colleagues about going like, this is really looking terrible. She's like, you breathe, you do this, you do that. I'm like, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Go. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is such a good point. Mentoring doesn't have to be, by the way, there's mentor, coach, sponsor, advocate, friend, right? And all of those roles we all play. Mentoring, you're so right, Isabel, doesn't have to be a form, 30 minutes, structured. It can be little bits and acts of goodness, acts of kindness, acts of, you know what, connection, just like that. Like, hey, I think it'd be great if you met this person here because you guys would have a great conversation. Boom, that's it. And yeah, right. Totally.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Such a good point, right?
And yeah. And they want to mentor their peers. And you're going to say that makes no sense if they are part of the same, age group, but actually it does make sense because they relate to experience in ways that are never going to relate to experience. And I tell them, I'm no longer mentoring you, I'm picking your brain. You are the future. I'm getting into this place where I need you desperately to keep me fresh, to keep me on my toes, because I don't live the way you do. Social media. And the truth is now, it's almost this balance where you need a mentor, then you become a mentor, and then you have to be the mentee again because it's this exchange. Things have also changed, years back. I remember we would go into an event and there would be like 2 or 3 of us, and we would go like, hey, okay, we're here. Let's go around and like talk. We're walking now and we're like, okay, we don't have to do this now. We just can really like start talking to any other new young woman who's joining our industry. The last thing is we have a client called Aqua Blue. Their last recruit, we decided to change the whole mentor. The CEO is going to talk. He can talk a lot and he's wonderful. But we said, your last hires, all of them are going to manage the mentor program. And what they are going to do is they're going to tell your leadership everything that this organization can do better, not just, internally, but also those are the kids that get, all the automated marketing discussion online. They are the guys who are getting the customer phone call, and I'm like, listen to them, because they're having discussion now with your customer that you no longer have. And by doing this group of, they were like a few, and it's growing so fast. But what it does for this organization, it actually helps them accelerate how they respond to customers. Because they're like, hold on, no, that's not how they're meaning that. That's how I didn't mean that. And you're going to have a trouble ticket, but I have had that discussion, through the chat bot for the past 20 minutes. And it's remarkable because all of a sudden they feel relevant, which is also a massive theme, which is all about be relevant. So how do you help young new talent feel like they are relevant, not just, working spreadsheet and office desk? Heather? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Hey guys, before we depart, we were remiss if we did not honor Dr. Martin Luther King, because today is Martin Luther King Day. And every step forward is a step towards progress. So keep that in mind. Invest in yourself, invest in those around you. Thank you so much for this amazing honor.
No, this was great. Thank you for everybody showing up. This is so good. If you're on camera, we have a full room. And now we have 7 men, because I am going to include you in it. So, thank you so much. And again, please ask anyone at this table if you wish to join us this afternoon. And let's try to make a follow-up out of this session with some of the to-dos, because you have to talk to take action, but at the end of the day, it's better to act. So very happy to probably talk about more next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great show.